Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel, the sub-series that examines the many supports of the Fire Emblem series. I'm your host, I Made Melee Kirby, and today we're going to be talking about some of the characters from Etruria. We got Klein, Clarine, Douglas, Cecilia, and Percival today is who we're going over. So, yeah, some cool characters to talk about. I don't really have, going into this, I didn't really have an opinion on any of these guys. And for the most part, I would say that hasn't changed. I don't think, any of them have supports that really, completely change my perception of their character or anything like that. So this might be a little bit quicker, less eventful of an episode, but I still think for the most part, these guys are pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. So let's go ahead and start with Clarine. Clarine has 5 support partners in her roster. She has Lance, Klein. I was trying to do this off memory, but I can't. Lance, Klein, Dorothy. Where the fuck is Clarine? Lance, Deke, Rutger, Dorothy, and Klein. So her Lance support I've already talked about. I've actually talked about most of these already. But her Lance support is honestly kind of cute. She clearly has a crush on him. And it's kind of just her basically trying to hint at that, but not wanting to say it. And either Lance not getting it, not understanding, or purposefully kind of turning a blind eye because he's not interested but doesn't want to hurt her feelings. Kind of take your pick on that interpretation there. This is something that comes up in a few supports, I think, over the course of the game, where there's no paired endings in this game other than whoever Roy ends up marrying. He'll have a paired ending with that character. So there are a lot of supports in this game that kind of imply a romantic connection that never end up going anywhere, well, at least in their endings. But what that allows for is kind of your own headcanons. And I mean, you can headcanon in any game, right? But in the later GBA games and some other games where we do have paired endings, it's kind of, it's harder to be like, okay, well, if these characters ended up together, they would have had a paired ending. Or sometimes they do have a paired ending, and that paired ending is and they both died and never saw each other for the rest of their lives. Or something. I can't think of an example of that. I think there's one, it's like Heath and Priscilla, I think is one of them, or something like that, where one of the characters just they clearly had feelings for each other, but they just never saw each other again. And it's sad, and I don't like those endings. I like my sappy romance endings. Call me Chloe, but yeah. So this is one of those where it's if you want to imagine the two of them kind of end up together after the war, that seems fine. That sounds like a enjoyable headcanon. But obviously we don't have anything to base that on, and it's not anything crazy either. They're just flirting a little bit, or she's flirting with him as best as she can, while still being trying to not let on that she has feelings for him. Her Deke support is her kind of just. It's like a worse version of the Klein support, honestly. Instead of being characterful in any way, like the Klein and Deke support was, that added a lot for both characters, I feel like. This one is just Clarine kind of saying, oh, hey, you're this person who saved my brother's life in the past, and, you have a connection to my family, I want to learn more about you, and Deke is like, no, and go away, basically. And then by the end, they're on good terms, they're talking to each other, and, they're fine, but I think it's a little underwhelming. It's definitely played more for comedy than I think any kind of character development. So I would have liked if we had gotten a little bit more from that angle. In fact, she doesn't even find out that he's Deke until the A support. The C and B supports are just her following him around and getting him to try to talk to her, and it's just not working. So yeah, I don't know. It's not a great support. I'm not a huge fan. The Rutger support is them bonding. It's also one that kind of has a little bit of a romantic subtext. She calls him handsome and says oh, I'm gonna kind of make you look like a proper gentleman, and he's like, nope, leave me alone. At one point he makes her cry and apologizes, and then in the A support, she's trying to be polite to him, and this is definitely the best part of the support. It's genuinely pretty funny. She's trying to be nice to him and polite and cordial, and he's like, you're acting like someone you're not. Please just yell at me again, and kind of bring a smile to my face, and that's how I know that you're like acting like yourself. And she's kind of touched by that, but that's really it. The conversation doesn't go anywhere past that. A lot of very like underwhelming supports. I do like this next one though. The Dorothy support is pretty cool. It's mostly cool for Dorothy, but honestly, Clarine gets a little bit out of it too. So Clarine basically says, Dorothy, I'm gonna give you a makeover. We're gonna make you look like a proper lady, and all the boys will be fawning all over you. And Dorothy's like, oh, that sounds nice. Maybe we could do that. And they try, and there's some good goofs in there about like Dorothy trying to talk like a noble and saying like, oh, would you like to come over for some tea and crumpets? That's a good bit. But ultimately, the A support is about Dorothy saying, it's not working. I should just give up because like someone like me wouldn't be able to make this work anyway. Your baseline is so bad. There's not a point. And Clarine says, well, the reason it's not working is because you need to have more confidence in yourself and stop talking like that. And that kind of, gives Dorothy a little bit of a confidence boost. And they say that they're friends by the end and drop the formalities. It's cute. It's nothing to write home about. If this was like, her worst support, I would say like, oh yeah, this is like there are some characters where like they have a bunch of really good supports, and like one like this, which is just kind of nice, would be one of their weaker ones. Unfortunately for Clarine, it's one of her stronger ones. So she's not really winning any awards with these. Her final support is with Klein. And it's just the two of them bonding, and having cute moments together. She clearly really, really likes her brother. Part of me feels like they might have been going for like a Lachesis Eldagon vibe here. Which, I mean, it's never made explicit, thankfully. Like, I'm glad it isn't. But that's kind of the impression I get. It seems like she might have like legitimate romantic feelings for him. They definitely stepped away from the incest in FE6, and honestly, they don't ever really bring it back until like I want to say Fates, is where it starts to get weird again. There are a couple like Erica and Ephraim people kind of are weird about, but I don't think anything in the game kind of like implies that. There's some Tellius characters that people are weird about, but for the most part, it's really just Kaga, and then some of the past like post awakening stuff. Anyway, I kind of lost the plot with that one a little bit. Basically, Klein kind of scolds Clarine for being so, because she's acting very immature, and he scolds her, and she's like, don't be mad at me, and she says, well, like, I'm proud of you for maturing. I want you to mature and act like a grown woman. She also says like, you see, this support is really good, but only the A support. The rest of it is like pretty basic standard stuff. It's not bad by any means, but the A support is good. So Clarine says like, oh, I don't think I want to go back to the mansion. I want to go back home after the war's over because I don't want to be just some, figurehead, another pretty face in the court of the Etrurian nobles. And I think that that's a really interesting premise that they do absolutely nothing with anywhere else. If their entire support chain had been about that, or if this was a thread that was picked up in multiple support chains with her, then I think it would be more understandable, or it would be more interesting. But they just don't do that. This is the only place where it's ever mentioned, and as neat of an idea as that is, I think that's really all there is to it. Like they don't do anything with it. So I would have liked to see more of that. But as it is, it's like fine. It's not the end of the world. There's also some stuff in here. I'm not gonna go on about this for a while because it's clearly, this might be like a translation thing or whatever. But there's some stuff in here about the Etrurian generals that like kind of confuses me. So this is in the A support. Clarine's like, oh, I know what I want to do when I grow up. And she says, I want to be a magic general like General Cecilia. Now, I don't know. She says a magic general. So I assume that this does not mean that she wants to be the mage general. But Klein kind of reacts like that is what she meant. Because I don't see any reason why Cecilia could not be a general in the Etrurian army. Like, she's still young. She has some experience in combat. Like, she could do it. Why not? But Klein is acting like that's a very unrealistic goal for her. I don't know. And then the part that confuses me even more is that Clarine says, "As the magic general, I'll help you work as the archery general." Which is like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is the archery general? It's literally never been mentioned before. I assume. I mean, obviously, the three generals of the Etrurian army, the mage general, the knight general, and the great general, they are not the only generals in the Etrurian military. Obviously, there have to be more than that. But I don't get where all these titles are coming from. Is there an archery general? Is there like a Pegasus general? That would be fucking rad. Oh no, the Pegasi aren't from Etruria. Never mind. But is there like a like a hero general or something? I don't know. It's silly, but like I don't really get it. Doesn't matter. It just made me think of some questions about the Etrurian military structure that clearly were not like very well thought through. That's it really, and that's all of Clarine's supports. I think Clarine is a pretty mid character for the most part. I think that if they had taken some of these ideas in the Dorothy support and especially in the Klein support and did more with them, I think she could have been interesting. But as it stands, like those two supports are like pretty decent, and the rest of them are just really forgettable or contribute much more to the other character than to her. It's a shame. You know, I wish they could have done more with her. Okay, moving on to Klein. Klein has 5 support partners as well: Deke, Clarine, Thea, Elphin, and Percival. So the Clarine support we'll start with that one. Obviously, I just talked about it. I don't think it's really any better for Klein than it is for Clarine. He kind of puts on the hat of like the caring older brother who just wants his sister to be responsible and to you know, be mature and grow into the role that she wants to be in. But other than that, he doesn't really do anything. I'd say that that's a lot more. I will say that it is a good character moment for him that he is so supportive of her desire to not just be a pretty face in the court of the nobility. I think that's cool. I think a lot of characters probably wouldn't have done that, or would have said like, oh, you know, stay in the role that you're supposed to be in, or whatever. Or even if it's not like from that perspective, you know, I could very easily see him saying something like, oh, well, you should do that because it'll keep you safe. It'll make life easy for you. I want you to have a safe, happy, easy life. But even he's the one who suggests that, like, well, yeah, it would be an easy life, but there's more to life than just living a cushy, easy life. So he's open to it. And I think that that's cool. You know, he's supportive. But that's really the best we can get from him in that support. The Deke support I've already talked about in the Deke episode, and I think that Klein's half of the support is not any more interesting. I mean, I talked a little bit about Klein in that episode, I think. But basically, I think what stands out about Klein here is that he is kind of, you know, he is. I would say, and I'm thinking forward to a couple of the other supports. I would say that Klein is a very empathetic and a very caring young man who has a lot of role models in his life that he aspires to, you know, to make as happy as possible. And he wants to be with them, and he wants to cherish his relationships with them. I think that is the best way that you could describe Klein. I think that he has this relationship with Deke, he has it with Percival, he has it with Elphin. And I think with the other two, they are the ones who kind of look up to him in that way. And I think from that angle, you can kind of see how he wears that position of the authority. I guess not authority figure, but like the role model that is being looked up to. And I think that he is empathetic and supportive in that role. I don't know. That's kind of my thesis on Klein right now. I think it's pretty interesting. It is a through line for his character, which certainly does not exist in every other character in this game. It is a consistent through line that Klein is either, talking to somebody that he looks up to greatly, or talking to someone who looks up to him greatly, and getting to see him in both of those positions is pretty cool. So for his part in the Deke support, you can see that like he admires Deke, he really looks up to Deke and is grateful to him. So he wants Deke to be a part of his life, and he doesn't want Deke to go away and pretend like nothing ever happened, because he wants that relationship with Deke back. And it's cool. It's cute. And I think the fact that he's able to talk, that's the other thing. He is kind of a very significant voice of reason to the two older men in his life. I think that he does as much for them as they do for him. I think it's a very reciprocal kind of dynamic, which I think is interesting. It's not just one-sided. Deke and Percival inspire him, and he's the one who's always, looking up to them. He has the courage to speak up against them and to say, "You're being ridiculous. Please, don't do that. Do this instead." And as a result, they can look to him and get that inspiration from him as well. I think that's a cool dynamic for his character. In Deke's case, obviously, Klein says, "Oh, I don't run away from this. I want you to be a part of our family." And of course, he convinces Deke in the end. Thea's next, but we'll skip to Percival, because I think we'll just continue that through line. So the Percival Klein support is all about Percival being kind of stoic, and Klein trying to like warm up to him and get him to show a little bit more comfort in his new role. Like it's the C support is all about how he's not really feeling comfortable in the new army. He's kind of a dick about it, actually. He says "I'm an Etrurian knight. My standards, I am unable to bend my standards so easily," which is kind of a dick thing to say. But I get where he's coming from. Whereas Klein says, I feel very comfortable here. I actually feel more at home here than I ever did in the Etrurian army. And is kind of hoping that Percival will end up feeling the same way. And then, what does he say? In the Beast support, Percival is like, "Hey, Klein, after this war's over, I want you to retire from the military. After this, I'm only going to take in the most trusted people in the military, and we're gonna like downsize, I guess, like from his direct service, I guess." It seems like Klein worked directly under Percival. They were never like on a joint mission together or anything like that until now. That does get mentioned, that they've never like worked together on the same battlefield, but it seems like Percival was in charge of Klein, maybe somewhat indirectly, but did so nonetheless. What I find interesting about this is, let me continue explaining what happened. So Percival says, "I'm going to dismiss everybody except those who I know I can trust and who are the most loyal to the country and to the king." What I find interesting about this is Klein doesn't take the angle of, "Oh, well, I didn't realize that you had so little trust in me. You should trust me. You should make me one of that inner circle because I'm trustworthy. I am loyal." And, getting offended by that part, I think it would be very easy to feel that way. But the direction that Klein chooses to go in is, "That's ridiculous. Why are you doing that?" It's not about put me in there and instead of dismissing me. It's about don't do that in the fucking first place, because that's stupid. He even says like, "You're being ridiculous," or something like that. This is kind of where he's like, "Oh, I wish I could look up to you as an older brother again." And then the A support is just about Klein saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be so stoic and you should show a little bit more emotion." And they kind of have like a little back and forth repartee, quipping at each other a little bit. It's cute, and this is a good support. I would say overall Klein's supports have been pretty good so far. Moving on to the we'll do Elphin next. So interesting. I'm going to talk about this with Elphin, but I find it interesting that Elphin kind of seemingly at random just kind of decides whether or not to tell people about his identity. It's not at random. It's just the logic is a little bit inconsistent. So, for instance, he tells Klein his identity immediately. Like Klein recognizes him and says, "Oh, I think you might be Prince Mirrodin," and Elphin says, "Yep, that's me." More or less, that's how the exchange goes, and they start talking about that. B support is like basically blank, but then the A support is Klein talking. So the B support is how do I word this? The first half of the A support is like a continuation of the B support. The B support actually feels unfinished, basically, but it doesn't matter. The A support, Klein basically says, or Elphin basically says, "Please don't call me Master Elphin or Sir Elphin. You need to drop the formalities because you're gonna blow my secret identity. I really just need you to call me Elphin." And Klein says, "No, I could never do that. You're my prince, yada, yada, yada." And then they kind of reminisce on how they first met. And Elphin tells a little story about how, I guess, Mirrodin's a few years older than Klein. So when Pent first brought Klein to Etruria, like the palace, Elphin saw Klein and said, he was like a toddler at that point. I think he was like 2. And he was so cute. He was so goddamn cute that Elphin's like, "You are now my younger brother." He told Pent, this child is now my brother, and he has to live here with me. And I guess he probably wasn't 2. He's probably like 3 or 4, somewhere around there. What Klein says in response to that is, "I cannot be your brother. I'm going to be your knight. So obviously I can't be your brother if I'm going to be your knight." It's just a cute little story, and it's cute that they like reminisce on it like that. Elphin's like, "Oh, you never change," or something like that. It's not anything to write home about, but I think it's fine. It does its job, and it characterizes Klein pretty well. I'd say Klein more than Elphin. Just the fact that he's like, from such a young age, he's so determined on his goal. And I think it's interesting because he kind of does the opposite of what I've been praising him for, where he'll stand up and correct people who he disagrees with, even if he looks up to them, because he's not willing to, disrespect the king. I guess it kind of is, in a sense. Like, he's like, "Oh, well, no, I'm not gonna, I don't care if I blow your secret identity. I'm gonna call you your majesty, goddammit," or whatever. So I guess you could look at it in that sense. But where I was going with this is, it shows that Klein has been willing to do this from a very young age, because he's first thing out of his mouth, when meeting the prince, is like, "Nope." It was like, the prince basically says something, like a direct order, basically, and Klein's like, "Nope, can't do that." So, I don't know, it's cute. Alright, and then finally, the Thea support is basically them talking about, like, Klein's like, "You don't need to be here anymore. Like, I hired you as an Etrurian general. I'm not an Etrurian general anymore. So you don't need to be here if you don't want to be." And then she says, "No, I want to be." And he's like, "Okay." And then the next thing he says is, "Well, if you are going to be here, then at the very least, what I can do is help you set up your next contract after this is over, so that you can stay, but like don't feel like you have to stay even after the war's over." And basically, Thea says, "You fucking idiot. I'm in love with you. Do you, like, why have you not picked up on that yet?" And Klein's like, "Oh, well, you probably shouldn't have been so," like, and they kind of do like a back and forth where he's like, "Well, it's not really my fault. I didn't figure it out because you're very cold and distant sometimes. So maybe you should have been a little bit more direct if you wanted me to figure it out." It's just cute. And this is like a very explicit, like, yes, they may not have a paired ending, but they, like, in any other game where paired endings exist, they absolutely would have a paired ending together. So it's nice, it's cute, and I think it he is, again, it kind of shows his like empathy towards people who look up to him, because he's not like, "Oh, you should get out of here. I don't want you to put yourself in danger for a responsibility that isn't yours," or whatever. She's like, "No, I want to be here," and he immediately drops it. He's like, "Okay, sure, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure," which is nice. I think it characterizes Klein pretty well. I like Klein. I think I've kind of, reading these supports and thinking about them, I've kind of come to an appreciation of Klein that I did not have previously. Which, again, not anything groundbreaking. I probably would have been able to tell you most of this before reading these supports, but, like, it's fine. It's still pretty cool. He's a nice character. All right. Cecilia is next. Cecilia's support partners are Roy, Saul, Lilina, Elphin, Percival, and Douglas. So the Roy support is fine. It's just them, talking, and Roy feels a little bit out of place ordering her around because, like, not only is she older than him and such an important figure in another country's military, she also taught him. She was his tutor when he was in Ostia. So they have that little bit of a personal connection there. And she kind of scolds him and is like, you need to give me orders because you're the fucking general of this army. The Beast support, they have a nice little bonding moment over the fact that Roy is, like, concerned about the common folk and isn't hyper-focused on winning so much as he is about, like, winning while also making sure that everybody's safe. It's a nice, cute little support that is painted in a very weird light when you realize that at the end of the game they have a paired ending together, so they get married, and Cecilia seems to be, like, twice Roy's age, which is, kind of yikes. But if you put that aside, it's just a nice little, they formed a nice little relationship, like at the end of it, she's like, you're not my student anymore. I now respect you as a colleague and as a friend. And that's great. I just don't know why they needed to make it romantic, and make it really fucking weird. Her Saul support is pure comedy, and it's funny. It's genuinely very funny. Saul is just hitting on her, and Cecilia keeps coming up with different reasons why, to, like, get out of the situation. She's not, like, perturbed by it at all. She's not, like, flustered. She just is very matter of fact, like, nope, bye. And then the A support is, I'm just going to skip over the C and B supports. They're both pretty basic, but the A support is really funny. Basically, she says, oh yeah, I'll go on a date with you. And Saul's like, really? Like, actually? And she's like, yeah, no, absolutely. You should be, just a fair bit of warning though. My father, will kill you, when he finds out that, we're dating. So just, be aware of that. And he's like, well, actually, on second thought, maybe I don't have time for this after all, and leaves. She clearly has no patience for that. This kind of ties in a little bit with her Douglas support about how she has always been treated. It's the only. Let's just skip straight to the Douglas support. Actually, that's probably the most interesting one that she has next. So her Douglas support is about them again, kind of reminiscing about their history together. Douglas has been historically very hard on her, and calling her weak and not strong enough and things like that, but she never really had any problems with it because she knew that it came from a place of genuine care. And she knows this because they talk a little bit about how her gender kind of gave her a lot of enemies. A lot of people wouldn't follow a female general, or kind of made fun of her for being a female general and saying, oh, you're just a woman or whatever. And one day, Douglas walked in on that happening and just yelled at all of them and told them that she was much stronger than all of them, which is, probably true. And Cecilia really, took that to heart and thought it was nice. Now, the reason I wanted to go straight to this one is because this gender through line does not actually come up in any of her other supports, but you can kind of see seeds of it in other places, right? Like for example, the Saul support that we just talked about. She is probably very used to being hit on by, pigs, right? Like, for lack of a better term, like Saul, I don't think Saul's a bad guy, but he's obviously, kind of a womanizer. And that's kind of gross, and she's probably very used to that. So I think it makes perfect sense for her to have tactics in, ready to go for getting people like that to leave her alone. It makes sense. And then I think the other place where we can see it a little bit is the Lilina support. I have actually talked about the support previously in the Lilina episode, and I think it's actually very good for Lilina's character. For Cecilia, it's a little bit less interesting. The reason I think we can apply some of the thoughts about gender to this support is because this is the only support that Cecilia has with another woman or another girl, and I think it's very easy, even though gender never comes up explicitly, it's very easy to, especially as another magic user, it's very easy to imagine Cecilia seeing a lot of herself in Lilina, especially in how she compares herself to Roy. That's not really what the support is about, so I'm not trying to like read completely irrelevant topics into a support that has nothing to do with that, but I do think it's worth thinking about. This support is more so about Cecilia teaching Lilina the lesson that some people are better at certain things just naturally, and it's important to assign people within the roles that they are best suited for, rather than trying to make everybody fit every mold. I just saying that out loud has me thinking about Three Houses, and how you can really give people roles that they are not suited to in that game. So if you're ever playing Three Houses, maybe take Cecilia's advice to heart. Teach them things that they're good at instead of trying to make them proficient in things that they are not good at. That being said, I don't think the support really does as much for Cecilia as it does for Lilina, again, other than like the implications you could read into it about the whole gender thing, and then also just Cecilia in general being like a strong teacher and a role model for Lilina to look up to, inspiring Lilina to kind of do what she feels like she needs to. But that's really about it. It's not a great support for Cecilia. Really good for Lilina though. The Elphin support is, honestly, I just find it kind of weird more than anything else. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, and something that I'm going to touch on more when we get to Elphin. Elphin does not immediately tell Cecilia what the deal is. Like she has the same reaction that Klein does, where she sees Elphin and is like, "You look exactly like Prince Mirrodin," and Elphin says, "Nope, you've confused me with somebody else. Please go away." And eventually, in the B support, she's persistent enough to like figure it out and force Elphin to admit it. But I don't get that. So Elphin says, "I didn't want you to get caught up in all this, whatever that means." I'm pretty sure she's already caught up in all of it, but whatever. But the other thing is, like, does that mean that you're okay with Klein being caught up in it? I don't get that. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but whatever. And then the A support is just Cecilia being mad and kind of like a little bit of a comedy thing about like, oh, she's kind of salty that Mirrodin didn't tell her, but ultimately, as long as he's safe and as long as he's doing what's best for Etruria, she's going to be able to let it go. And then finally, we have the Percival support, which is just really bad. Like this is down there as one of the worst supports in the game. I think it's just them talking about very obvious things that like so many other supports are about. Like if you got rid of the names, you could put this in like basically anybody's fucking support log, and I would not be able to tell you who it was. It's just like I don't really have anything else to say about it. Really, it's the A support is like all right because Percival's like we're gonna make Etruria great again. And Cecilia's like, yeah, all right, I guess so. And Percival's like, come on, you gotta have confidence. And if we give up, then everybody else will give up too. And, that's all right, I guess. But it's just, it's so boring. Definitely a really weak support to end on there. But I think overall, Cecilia is like a pretty decent character. She has some good supports here. I really like her Douglas support. I think her Douglas support is probably her best one. It's genuinely great. Maybe I wouldn't go that far. It's quite good, though. I would say it's very solid, at least. All right. Next, we have Percival. Percival's support partners are Dorothy, Klein, Larum, Elphin, Cecilia, and Douglas. So the Dorothy support is pretty basic. I'll keep this one brief. she's training, and Percival helps her improve her training by being more confident in herself, reminding her that there's nothing to worry about because as an archer she gets to stay on the back lines, and so she should be a little bit more comfortable, and generally a bit more put together, I guess, and Dorothy really takes that to heart and improves significantly. I think Percival is really at his best when he is, or I guess at his most comfortable when he is helping people, or maybe helping people is that, like, instructing people, I guess, helping people bring out the best in themselves, when he is that sort of, like, role model type figure. And in fact, if we want to, like, really read into the situation more than is maybe necessary, I think you could argue that, like, part of the reason Percival feels so out of place here, like, he never goes into that in any of his supports other than the Klein one, which I already talked about. He says, like, I don't really feel comfortable here. What they have in this army just doesn't do it for me. I think you can make an argument that she feels that way, or he feels that way, because he is not the top dog anymore. And I don't mean that from the perspective of always, like, power hungry, or like he thinks he's better than other people. I mean that in, like, the nicest possible way, where I think he is at his best as a leader. And I don't think he feels comfortable being under somebody, other than, like, obviously he has a ton of respect for Douglas, and that's really, I think, where he's able to kind of bend the knee a little bit and say, like, okay, no, you're above me. But, like, Roy, he doesn't dislike Roy. It doesn't seem like he thinks Roy's a bad leader or anything, but he's a 14-year-old kid, and I think that maybe is a little off-putting for Percival, to be under somebody so inexperienced. I don't know. Again, that he never says any of that explicitly, but I think with how he is in his Dorothy support, he's so comfortable. It's like so natural to him. It comes so naturally, and I think that is significant. Because in all of his other supports, as we're going to see, or most of his other supports, he is a lot more reserved, a lot more stoic, and a lot less willing to kind of, like, engage in conversation. The Klein support we already talked about, and I think that this one's good for Percival, just in the sense of, like, he kind of, like, puts him as sort of like a fish out of water type, like he's uncomfortable. There's something off-putting about all this that he's not quite sure about. It's fine. It's a decent Percival support. I think it's a good Klein support, not as good of a Percival support. I think the Elphin support is pretty uneventful for Percival. I think it's pretty good for Elphin, and I'm definitely going to talk more about it when we get to Elphin. But for Percival, I think it's really just Percival trying to convince Elphin to come back to Etruria, and eventually Elphin says yes. That's really all there is. I think if we want to really get into the nitty gritty, and this is just obviously confirmation bias, but Percival is a lot more willing than Klein is to drop the formalities with Elphin. So that could be indicative of something. Maybe he feels like he's a little bit more willing to kind of like drop the subordinates. I don't know, just food for thought, I suppose. The Cecilia support is really boring. We already talked about it. All right, Lalam's support is pretty funny, and I think it's a comedy support, and I think it is a really good one because I think it is characterful at the same time. It suggests to me that Percival's kind of stoic attitude and his general like demeanor being so cold-hearted, at least partially, is an act. And maybe an act is the wrong word. I would say he makes an effort to appear that way. I do think it comes naturally to him, but I think every once in a while he'll let the facade drop a little bit, just a little bit, and he's very self-conscious about that. So he basically tells Lalam that her dancing has no value and is of no use to him, and she gets really sad and runs away. And then in the A support, he's like, well, he's just kind of muttering to himself, and he says, she was kind of annoying, but now that she's not around anymore, I kind of miss her. And Lalam overhears him say that, and she's like over the moon, and Percival's like, I didn't say that. Nope. You were hearing things. I never said that I wanted to hang out with you. I think he gets cut off before he finishes his thought. Oh no, he says it. But yeah, he's definitely like, he's like, nope, you're making shit up. I never said that. It's cute and it's funny. And I think it adds a little bit to Percival's character. This is the only one really where we get to see him act a little bit more human, I suppose, which is neat. The Douglas support is actually very similar to the there was an aspect of the Cecilia Douglas support that I forgot to mention. But I will talk more about that when we do Douglas at the end, I think, because I want to compare the Cecilia Douglas support to the Percival Douglas support. The C and B support are very mundane. There's nothing really going on there. They're just talking. Douglas is like, oh, I'm getting kind of old, and Percival's like, no, don't worry about it. The A support, basically, Douglas tells Percival, I'm going to retire after the war is over. I think the king is going to step down as king once the war is over and give that position give the position to his son, Myrddin, because obviously they both know that Elphin is alive. So they're saying once the king finds out, then, the king will just step down. Douglas says, I want you to be the next great general. And Percival fights back a little bit. He's like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly. I'm not skilled enough for that. And Douglas says, well, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I think you would be a great, great general. And eventually Percival says yes, basically, which I think is interesting. In relation to the Cecilia support, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between them, and kind of I think this ties into. I'll just start talking about it a little bit right now, which is that Cecilia basically has the same thing. He doesn't offer the position of great general to her, but he tells her that he's thinking about stepping down. And Cecilia says, absolutely not. You cannot. You should not. You're being ridiculous. I want you to continue filling in your current role. And she manages to convince Douglas. So I think it's interesting that one person insists that he stays, whereas the other person eventually acquiesces and says, okay, well, fine, I'll do what you want. And I do think it's a little telling that it doesn't take very much convincing for Percival to accept the role of the most powerful general in Etruria. And that's not to say that he's being power hungry or that he doesn't deserve it, because he absolutely does. He's a very strong warrior. But I think, again, this ties into Percival's comfort in a leadership role. So yeah, I mean, it's worth consideration. I don't think Percival is a power hungry character by any means, but I do think he feels a little out of place when not being put in the position of a leader. When he's just one of the rank and file with everybody else, it be off putting to him a little bit. All right, and with that, we can move on to our last character of the day, which is Douglas. Douglas has 5 support partners. He has Geese, Lalum, Elphin, Cecilia, 6 support partners. Geese, Lalum, Elphin, Cecilia, Igreen, and Percival. I want to start with the Igreen support because I think it's probably his weakest support. I don't really like Douglas in the support at all, actually. Basically, Igreen is like, hey, can you please not invade Nabata ever? And Douglas is like, well, I can't make any promises. And I mean, it's just, I get why he's saying that. He can't promise anything. If his king says invade Nabata, he would do it. So at least he's not lying. He's being honest. But, that's still sucks. I don't like that he would do it. So fuck Douglas. But otherwise, he does say like, oh, I will try to make sure that never happens. Sweet enough, I guess. It's fine. We have already talked about the Cecilia and Percival supports. I've kind of basically touched on everything I wanted to from there. I think the Cecilia support shows that Douglas is a very kind and caring superior officer, even if he doesn't always show it in the nicest of ways. He has the tough love mentality, but he definitely, I think he respects Cecilia regardless of her gender, which I think is something that she really values in their relationship. Percival, I think he trusts immensely as well, and Percival has an immense amount of respect for him. So in general, I would say Douglas is okay in those supports. He's not great, but he's not bad either. I really, 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 really like the Lalum support. The Lalum support is so cute, and they're just. I could sum it up very quickly. They're just bonding, as father and daughter. She is adopted, but they make that clear. But they have a genuinely very caring father-daughter bond, and they love each other very much. And one of my favorite moments comes right in the B support, where Lalum brings him some lunch, and Douglas is like, "Oh, we're in the middle of a battle. I probably shouldn't eat this right now." And Lalum says, "Oh, you're right. I was just being silly." And Douglas says, "You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to eat it right now because I don't want to waste your hard work." And that's just so wholesome. I love their relationship so much. They have a wonderful little support together. His support with Geese is also fantastic. I think that it's great for both of them. Douglas tries to compensate him more than he already has for, I guess, Geese, when Myrddin was running away from Etruria after the assassination attempt, Douglas entrusted him to Geese, but he had some misgivings about it. He's like, well, he's just a pirate, it could go badly, but I don't really have any other options. So he apologizes to Geese, like, "Hey, I doubted you. I shouldn't have doubted you. I should have trusted your honor." And Geese is like, "Yeah, whatever, it's fine. No, I get it. I would have had trouble trusting me too." Then Douglas tries to pay him, and Geese is like, "Well, you already paid me." And Douglas is like, "No. You need to be paid more." But Geese refuses. He says, "No, I don't want any more money." And ultimately, the only thing that Geese asked for was for Douglas to make sure that the country became a prosperous place where people could safely travel and do business, and that would help him out immensely in the long run. And Douglas agrees, and it's just a nice support where the two of them come to a really nice mutual understanding of each other, and I think that that's great. And then finally, the Elphin support. We find out that Elphin, if you notice in Elphin's portrait, he has his eyes closed, which is pretty unusual. Most portraits don't work that way, or don't look that way, but apparently it's because Elphin periodically goes blind. I guess it's like a side effect of the poison that he ingested. I do think this is an interesting support for Elphin, because this is the only one that I'm aware of, at least, where he expresses his hesitation to return to Etruria. I think Perceval, he says, "I'm coming back." Klein, I think he said, "I'm coming back." Like all these people. Cecilia, he tells he's coming back. Douglas is the only person who he trusts enough to confide in with the fact that he's thinking about not coming back. He doesn't like Etruria very much anymore. He found out about how awful it was to live under the Etrurian nobles, as a part of being, on the Western Isles. And overall, I think, he struggles with that a little bit. He doesn't really come to a decision about that in the support. It's left up for interpretation as to what he ends up doing. I mean, I guess his ending will tell us one way or the other what he decides to do. But I think I can respect that for Elphin. But I'm getting off topic because this episode isn't about Elphin. It's about Douglas, and for Douglas, I think he's all right here. He's a good listener. He tells Prince Myrddin that he'll support him no matter what he does, and generally is a nice supportive knight. That's really all there is to it. That's all there really is for Douglas's character and the characters that we've talked about today. More broadly, I think Douglas is fine. I'd say he's pretty good. I like Douglas a lot. I think that Clarine is mid. Percival's pretty alright. Cecilia's fine. But I think the standout one here today is definitely Klein. I think Klein is probably my favorite of these five. I still don't really love him, I wouldn't say. But Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to give it some more thought as to how I feel about him later. I think this game in general does not have the strongest cast of characters. I've kind of reached that conclusion. You know, I've done how many of these SSS episodes now, and it's, you know, for the most part, it's just a lot of characters that I feel mostly neutral on, or that they have a couple good supports but not a lot. It's, you know, it's a bummer. There's not a whole lot of excellent standout characters in this game like there were in the previous two games. But maybe I'm expecting too much. You know, I don't know. Could be. Anyway, I hope you guys had a good time listening to me talk about these supports. In the next episode, we are going to be talking about, it's going to be after the next main episode, which should be coming soon. Hopefully, I will get that out about the same time as I get this one out. But for the time being, so you have to wait for the next main episode, and then after that, we will be talking about Zealot, Trek, Noah, Tate, and Juno. So some Ilya people. Alright, yep, that's all I have to say about these guys, so I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.